The applause echoed in my ears as I walked across the stage, my gown swishing around me like a ghost of the future I thought I would have. The noise, the flashing cameras, the beaming faces of everyone around me, none of it felt real. None of it felt like victory. I could feel my parents' eyes on me from the front row, or rather, I could feel their absence. They weren't proud. Not in the way I needed them to be. Not in the way I thought I deserved. I had earned this moment, and yet they were looking at me like I was a failure. Their faces were cold, the indifference etched in their expressions as I walked past them. I could feel their judgment, feel the unspoken words between us. And then I saw it. The envelope sitting on the edge of my father's chair, neatly folded, my name scribbled on it in dark ink. It wasn't a letter of congratulations. It wasn't a card with a check or a simple message of love. No, it was the disownment papers. I froze, my heart thumping in my chest. How could they do this? How could they give me this in the middle of my graduation day, the day I had worked my entire life for? I tried to ignore it, tried to push it out of my mind, but I couldn't. The thought gnawed at me as the dean called my name. Ashley Turner. The crowd cheered, the flashing cameras, but my parents remained silent. Not a single clap, not a single cheer from the people who had supposedly been there for me my entire life. I walked across that stage with the weight of my entire childhood on my shoulders, and they didn't even acknowledge it. But as I reached the center of the stage, a voice cut through the tension. David Brooks, the CEO of Brooks Tech, the man who had made millions with nothing but his intellect and perseverance, the man whose name was synonymous with innovation, success, and ambition. He was standing right there, on the stage, calling my name. Ashley Turner, he said, his voice ringing through the auditorium like a shot fired into the silence. The next recipient of the Brooks Tech Leadership Award is someone who has shown incredible resilience despite personal struggles. Please join me, Ashley. I felt like I was going to pass out. What? David Brooks, the CEO of Brooks Tech? How did he know my name? I turned to look at my parents, searching for something, anything, but there was nothing. They were frozen, their faces pale with shock. What would they do now? But what happened next would shake everything I thought I knew about my family and the future I had fought so hard to create. Would I prove them wrong? What do you think happened when the CEO called my name? Would you have taken the opportunity, or would you have confronted your family first? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what you would do in my shoes. I've always been told that hard work pays off, that if you keep your head down, focus on what you want, and stay determined, eventually things will work out. But as I stood there, on the stage, the weight of my gown heavy on my shoulders and my heart even heavier, I started to wonder if that was all a lie. Growing up in Chicago, everything I knew was about success, or at least the image of it. My parents, Catherine and John, were the epitome of everything society told me I should strive for. They were always impeccably dressed, attended the finest parties, and drove the best cars. Our house was big, too big for just the three of us. But I never felt like I belonged inside it. At least not the way my sister, Hannah, did. Hannah had always been their golden child. While I worked late into the night scrubbing floors at the local coffee shop to save for textbooks, Hannah was out with friends, picking out new clothes, going to parties. And my parents, they didn't care to notice. They never had to work for anything. Everything was handed to them on a silver platter. And of course, they never said anything about it. My mother would tell me how smart I was, but it always felt more like a quiet dismissal, a way of saying, "You're independent, you don't need us," which was their way of saying, "You'll never be enough for us." While my parents lived their perfect lives, I was left trying to figure out where I fit in. I loved school, I loved learning, and I loved being independent, but sometimes it felt like I was invisible. I could stand in a room full of people and still feel utterly alone. They didn't need me to be a part of their world. They just needed me to be the other one. When I was younger, I'd try to get attention the way any child would. Good grades, perfect behavior, but nothing was ever good enough. I'd come home with a report card covered in A's, and my father would nod approvingly, only to turn his attention right back to Hannah, who was sitting there, doing nothing, just looking pretty. Every family dinner felt like a performance, one where I was always the understudy, never the lead. The real turning point came when I turned 18. I was still in high school when my father pulled me aside one evening. I remember sitting on the couch watching a rerun of a game show when he asked me if I was planning to go to college. It wasn't an encouraging question. It was more like a subtle interrogation, the kind of question that made me feel small, like I should already know the answer. "I guess I'll apply," I said, trying to sound confident, though the uncertainty in my voice gave me away. He shrugged. "You'll figure it out. You've always been good at that." And with that, he turned back to the television. That moment, I knew. I was on my own. College was an afterthought for them. For Hannah, it was just another box to check. But for me, it was my only shot. I wasn't the child who would be handed a future like Hannah was. I had to fight for it. I had to prove to them, to everyone, that I was worth something. I spent nights studying, working part-time jobs to save money for applications, while my friends would go out for ice cream or hang out at the mall. I barely saw them. And still, every time I looked at my parents, I saw that they were looking past me, focusing only on Hannah, my sister who didn't need to try, the one who was adored effortlessly, the one who seemed to have it all handed to her. But no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I gave, I knew deep down that something would always be missing. I knew that nothing I achieved would ever be enough for them. And that thought gnawed at me, especially now, as I stood on that stage with the disownment papers staring back at me in my parents' hands. It's funny, really. I spent my childhood chasing after the love and approval of two people who would never truly see me. But when you're a kid, you don't realize that until much later. I remember the nights I stayed up late with my father, asking him for advice on life, on everything. He would look at me, nod, and say, "You're smart, Ashley. You'll figure it out." I wanted him to say more, wanted him to be proud of me for more than just surviving, but the words never came. In those moments, I learned how to keep my feelings tucked away, hidden in the back of my mind like a secret I wasn't allowed to share. With my mother, things were even more complicated. Catherine had always been a woman of high standards, strict, unyielding. She demanded excellence, perfection, and expected everyone to fall in line, especially me. Her love felt like a task, like something I had to work hard for, earn, and prove. She would call me into her office when I was young, her old vintage office chair creaking as she leaned over her desk, meticulously writing out the family's schedule for the week. "You need to keep up, Ashley. Don't fall behind," she'd say, looking over the rim of her glasses. She was a perfectionist, and that perfection was supposed to be inherited. It was always about competition, and I thought, for a time, that this was love. That maybe my mom just didn't know how to show affection, that she believed I needed to be strong to survive in the world. But as I grew older, it became clear this wasn't love. This was expectation wrapped in a veil of formality. She never knew me, not really. And then there was Hannah, my sister, the one they always adored, the one who always seemed to glide through life without effort. At first, I envied her. Why did she get the easy life while I had to fight for everything I got? But as I grew older, I realized something. She didn't understand me either. When I was a kid, she used to sit beside me while I did my homework, offering no help, no real support. She'd flip through her magazines or text her friends, completely unaware of the pressure I felt to live up to expectations. Every birthday, every holiday, my parents would look at Hannah and praise her as if she were a miracle child, while I sat in the background, my accomplishments overlooked. Still, it wasn't until the college applications came that I finally realized how deep the gap really was. That was the turning point. I filled out my applications late into the night, working tirelessly, trying to craft the perfect essays that would show I was deserving of the same opportunities as Hannah. When the acceptance letters came, we opened them together, as if that small moment of unity could erase the years of tension. But as soon as I saw her smile when she read her acceptance letter, I knew she had done it again. She had everything handed to her. My acceptance? It barely registered in their minds. My parents congratulated her first, showering her with affection, and then they turned to me, their cold acknowledgement, barely a nod of approval. That night, when the two of us sat in the kitchen, I asked her, "Hannah, do you ever feel like, I don't know, like you're just walking through life while I'm fighting for everything I get?" She looked at me, her face blank. "What are you talking about, Ashley? We're both going to the same school. It's not like you're struggling." Her words stung, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I took a deep breath, locked it all away, and smiled, because it was never about what I deserved. It was about what I had to prove to them. That night, I made a vow to myself. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval. I was going to make it on my own. Because if I didn't, no one else would.
The days leading up to graduation were like a blur of tension and anticipation. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The moment I walked into that auditorium, it was as if the air had thickened, like something was waiting to drop. My mind was a constant loop of thoughts, none of which were good. On the surface, everything seemed fine. I had the approval of my professors, my peers were congratulating me, and the campus was alive with the excitement of the ceremony. But all I could focus on were the faces of my parents, stone cold, sitting in the front row, their expressions unreadable. It was like they were there physically, but emotionally, they were miles away. Hannah, of course, was sitting next to them. The way she smiled, carefree and radiant, made me sick to my stomach. The image of her, perfect hair, flawless makeup, was like a reminder of everything I couldn't have. It was easy for her. Life was easy for her. I watched as she whispered something to my mother, and for the first time, I saw something that I hadn't noticed before, a subtle, silent agreement between them. I tried to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. This was my day, my moment. I had worked so hard for this, and I wasn't going to let anything ruin it. But the tension kept building, like a slow burn under my skin, a nagging sensation that I couldn't ignore. Then came the phone call. I was in the library, finishing up some last-minute revisions to my speech when I saw the number on my phone screen. It was Mom. "Hello?" I said, trying to hide the nervousness in my voice. "It was hello, Ashley," she said, her tone flat, distant. "We need to talk." I felt a sudden coldness wash over me. My heart skipped a beat. "What about?" "Not now. We'll discuss it after the ceremony. Just know, your father and I aren't happy with the decisions you've been making." The words stung. I wasn't sure what she meant. What decisions? What could I possibly have done to disappoint them now? I hung up, my hands trembling. My stomach twisted into a knot. The unease I felt suddenly bloomed into full-blown suspicion. Something was going on, and I didn't know what, but I could feel the walls closing in. The ceremony was the hardest part. The speech, the pomp and circumstance, and all the while I kept wondering if my parents were just waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to trip up, make a fool of myself. The smile on Hannah's face as she looked at me from the front row didn't help either. Her eyes almost seemed to say, "What's the point? You've already lost." And when the dean called my name, it felt like I was walking toward the firing squad. Every step to the stage, every clap of the audience felt like it was echoing off the walls of my parents' indifference. The moment I stood there in front of them, I knew I wasn't just facing the ceremony. I was facing a battle, one I didn't know how to win. But the phone call earlier had left me wondering, Had they planned something? Had they already made their decision about me even before the day began? The tension built slowly. Every word, every glance from my parents was like a countdown to something bigger. And then the unthinkable happened. David Brooks, the CEO of Brooks Tech, called my name. He offered me a job on the spot, right there in front of everyone. I thought I would pass out, but as I stood there, taking in the shock of it all, I saw my mother's face. For the first time in years, there was something there that I couldn't ignore. Dread. And that's when it hit me. What was she afraid of? What were they really hiding?
The applause was deafening, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I stood there in front of the crowd, my hands still shaking from David Brooks's unexpected offer. I had dreamed of this moment, yes, but not like this, not with them watching. David's voice was still ringing in my ears, but as I turned to face the audience, I found my parents frozen in their seats, staring at me like I was a stranger. Their expressions were unreadable, and for the first time, I didn't feel the rush of pride I had always expected. I had waited so long for them to see me, really see me, but now that they did, I was left with an emptiness I couldn't quite explain. As the applause died down, I turned to David with a tight smile, trying to push away the anxiety building in my chest. The reality of what had just happened was beginning to settle in. But just as I was about to leave the stage, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face. It wasn't the proud smile I had imagined for years. No, this was something darker. It was fear. And in that instant, I realized something I had been too blind to see for years. This wasn't about me. This was about them. I stepped off the stage, the weight of my acceptance still sinking in. But my parents didn't meet me halfway like they were supposed to. They didn't stand, didn't clap, they didn't even look at me. They stayed seated, as if they were waiting for something. For what? Approval? A sign from me? I walked down the aisle toward them, feeling my legs grow heavier with each step. My heart was beating faster now, the anxiety pushing through the excitement. When I reached their row, I stopped in front of them. I had to know. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but enough to cut through the silence between us. My father looked away, pretending to focus on something, anything, except me. My mother's face was pale, a slight twitch in her jaw betraying her composure. Before I could ask again, my mother spoke, her voice low but sharp. "You don't understand, Ashley. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. You weren't supposed to..." "Weren't supposed to what?" I interrupted, my voice trembling. I could feel the world crumbling around me, the truth dawning on me with a sickening clarity. "Your sister, Hannah, was supposed to get the recognition," my mother continued, her eyes darting to the floor. "She deserved it more than you." I froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I heard those words. She deserved it more than me? My entire life flashed before me, every moment of self-doubt, every time I had pushed myself harder than anyone else, all those sleepless nights working and studying. And here I was, standing in front of my parents, and they were telling me I wasn't enough, that I had never been enough. I felt the sting of those words deep in my chest, but instead of crumbling, I stood taller. Something shifted inside me, something that told me I didn't need them. I never had. I had been chasing their approval for so long, and now I realized that I would never get it. And I didn't need it anymore. Emotional turn. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut, and as much as it hurt, it was freeing. For the first time, I didn't need to please them. I had earned my success, and nothing they said could take that away.
The drive home was a blur. My parents didn't speak to me. They barely even looked at me. The car ride was thick with tension, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. I didn't know what to say, and it was clear neither did they. My heart had already broken, But the absence of any words, any attempt to explain, felt worse than anything they could have said. When we arrived at the house, I went straight to my room, not bothering to acknowledge them as they made their way to the living room. I shut the door behind me with a soft click, and finally, I let myself breathe. I let myself feel. But there were no tears. There was just this cold emptiness that settled in my chest. The quietness, the absence of any comfort was suffocating. I looked around at my room, the room I had grown up in, the one I had decorated with my own hands, and for the first time, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a cage. It felt like a place that had been holding me back for years, holding me hostage to the expectations they had created for me. The walls seemed to close in as I sat down on the bed, my hands trembling as I opened the disownment papers. The words blurred in front of my eyes, but I didn't need to read them again to know what they said. You're not good enough. You never will be. I had spent so much time trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine, trying to prove my worth to people who didn't even see me. But then, in that silence, something began to change. The numbness started to fade, and in its place, something stronger began to rise. It wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration, it was a quiet resolve. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had earned everything I had on my own. I stood up from the bed, looking around at the walls once more. This was the last time I would allow myself to feel small in this house. I grabbed my bag, stuffed the disownment papers into it, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. I didn't have to.
The next few weeks were a blur of action and quiet contemplation. I stopped waiting for a call from my parents, stopped hoping for them to come around. I realized that their rejection didn't define me. It was just a chapter in my story, one that I could close without looking back. But I knew it wasn't enough just to move on. I had to do something more, something that would not only prove my worth, but show them exactly what they had lost. I sat at my desk late that night, my fingers poised over my laptop. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room, and it gave everything an almost ghostly feel. My heart had stopped racing. Now it was calm, steady, focused. I wasn't angry. I was strategic. The first thing I did was look at the connections I had made over the years, the ones that had seen my potential when my family couldn't. David Brooks was the obvious place to start, but I had no intention of just accepting his offer blindly. No, I had to ensure that I could build something lasting from this opportunity, something they couldn't take away from me. I reached out to David's assistant and set up a meeting. I was going to make sure that I wasn't just an intern. I wanted a role that would demand attention, a position that would force my family to see me, not as the girl who worked 2 jobs to survive, but as the woman who had earned her place at the top. While I waited for the meeting, I turned my attention to my education. I spent hours researching Brooks Tech, its competitors, and the future of the tech industry. I immersed myself in learning what I would need to excel, preparing myself to not only meet expectations, but exceed them. This wasn't just about getting a job. This was about building a future where I would be irreplaceable. But my plans weren't just about work. No, there was something more personal at stake here, something that had been festering beneath the surface for years. I knew that if I were to truly move on from my parents' rejection, I had to do something that would shake them to their core. I had to make them realize what they had lost. I pulled out the disownment papers and looked at them one last time. I didn't see defeat. I didn't see rejection. I saw a reminder of what they thought of me and what I was going to prove to them. I didn't need them, and soon they would see exactly how wrong they were. As I finalized my plans, a sense of peace settled over me. I wasn't planning revenge in the traditional sense. This wasn't about hurting them. It was about showing them the consequences of ignoring me, of taking me for granted for so many years. They thought I would crumble, that I would need them. but I wasn't going to let them control my story anymore. This wasn't just about getting a job anymore. This was about taking control of my life, about building something no one, not even my parents, could tear down. I was no longer the girl they ignored, the one who worked in silence, hoping for recognition. Now I was the one who would be remembered for everything I had earned on my own. But what would you do in my shoes? Imagine your whole life constantly being told you're not good enough, working tirelessly to prove your worth, only to face rejection at the moment when you thought you would be seen. Would you give up, or would you rise and show them exactly who you are? Comment below and tell me how you'd handle it. Would you take the path of silence and success, or confront those who have held you back for years? I can't wait to hear what you think. The meeting with David Brooks had gone better than I could have hoped. It was everything I needed. His interest in my background, my drive, my ambition, it was all there. I had earned his respect, something I had never been able to say about my parents. By the time we finished, he offered me a position that would allow me to work directly with the leadership team. I was in. But it wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about showing my parents that I was someone worth acknowledging. I accepted the offer with determination, but I wasn't going to stop there. I knew the reality I had to face. I needed to set myself apart in a way that would force their eyes to open. So I started preparing a game plan, something they could never take from me, an achievement so powerful they couldn't ignore it. It wasn't long before I realized what needed to happen next: the award ceremony. I had been invited to the company's Brooks Tech Awards Gala, an event they held annually to celebrate top performers and emerging leaders. It was my chance. The night of the gala, I wore the dress that my mother would have disapproved of. Too bold, too daring. I didn't care. I wasn't dressing for them anymore. I was dressing for me. As I walked into the venue, the lights glittered off the walls and the chatter filled the air. People from all over the industry were gathered in one room, celebrating success, innovation, and progress. And I realized, for the first time, that I was no longer chasing validation from anyone. This was mine. The night was a blur of handshakes, congratulations, and lively conversations. But it wasn't until David Brooks stood to make the final announcement that I felt everything fall into place. He called me to the front, his voice echoing through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, this year's Innovative Leader Award goes to Ashley Turner, who, despite overwhelming challenges, has proven to be an exceptional leader with a dedication that is unmatched." The room erupted in applause, and I could feel my parents' eyes on me. This was it, my moment. I glanced over to see them frozen in place. They couldn't look away, couldn't pretend anymore. This wasn't just some small victory. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for. I stepped forward, feeling their gaze burn into my back. My heart was racing, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of their disappointment. But just as I was about to step down from the stage, I saw Hannah in the crowd, her smile faltering for the first time. She had always been the golden child, always the one who could do no wrong. Now, for the first time, she looked like she was questioning everything she had believed about herself. It hit me then, this wasn't just about my parents. It was about showing Hannah, too, that I wasn't just a shadow in her life. I was carving my own path. As the applause died down, I felt a weight shift in the air. My parents still didn't stand. They didn't acknowledge me. But this time, it didn't matter. It wasn't about their approval. It was about my journey, my growth. It was about finally taking control of my life and leaving behind everything that had held me back. I walked off the stage, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking into someone else's shadow. I was walking into my own future.
The weeks that followed the gala were a blur of meetings, projects, and new challenges. I immersed myself in my work at Brooks Tech, keeping my focus sharp and my priorities clear. Every day felt like a victory. But the true shift didn't come from the work itself. It came from within. I had stepped into a new role, one that was completely mine, without the shadow of my parents or anyone else hanging over me. Every time I walked into the office, I was reminded of how far I had come. I was no longer the girl who needed validation from anyone. I had earned my place, and I could feel the pride building in me, not from external applause, but from knowing that I had done this on my own terms. But there was a strange quietness that came with my success. My parents didn't reach out. Not once. I thought they would. After the award, after seeing what I had accomplished, but nothing came. No phone call, no message. They still didn't see me. Hannah, however, did. The first time I saw her after the gala, she was standing outside the office building, her arms crossed, a nervous smile on her face. "You look different," she said, her eyes scanning me up and down, as if she was seeing me for the first time. "I am," I replied, a quiet confidence in my voice that had never been there before. She didn't respond right away. I could see the unease in her eyes, the doubt, the same doubt I had once lived with. "I never knew," she said softly. "I never realized how much you had to fight for." I smiled faintly. "It's not about what you realize. It's about what I've become." Hannah's gaze softened, and for the first time in my life, I saw a glimmer of understanding. She didn't need to say anything more. We both knew that the gap between us was no longer about our parents. It was about our paths, our choices. I had taken mine, and she had to take hers. But even with this new sense of clarity, there was still the silence from my parents. I couldn't force them to acknowledge what they had missed, and I didn't want to. I had stopped needing their approval, stopped waiting for their validation. But the silence stung in a way I hadn't expected. One evening, as I sat in my apartment looking over a presentation for a new project, I received a message on my phone. It was from my mother. "I saw the award. Congratulations. We're proud of you, Ashley. Let's talk soon." That was it. No emotional outpouring, no recognition of what had transpired between us, just a hollow message that felt as empty as the years I'd spent chasing them. But strangely, I didn't feel the need to respond. I didn't need their words anymore. I stood by the window, watching the sun dip below the skyline of Chicago, the city I had come to love for its ambition and drive, for the same reasons I had fought for my place here. I thought back to my parents, to the pain of their rejection, but also to the strength I had found in myself. I had learned that sometimes the greatest victory is simply walking away, realizing that your worth isn't tied to anyone else's expectations. And as I closed my phone, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The chapter with my parents had closed, and it was time for me to write the next chapter on my own terms.
As I reflect on everything that's happened, I realize how much I've changed, not just in terms of success, but in how I see myself. The journey from feeling invisible to standing confidently in my own light has been the hardest, most rewarding part of this entire process. I spent so many years chasing my parents' approval, trying to mold myself into something they would recognize, something they would be proud of. And for what? To be constantly overlooked, constantly told that no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough? It took being disowned, having everything I had fought for dismissed in a single sentence, for me to realize the most important truth. I don't need anyone else's validation to define my worth. Not my parents, not my sister, not anyone. The hardest lesson was letting go of the hope that they would ever change. For so long, I had believed that if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, they would finally see me. But what I learned was that I was seeking approval from the wrong people. I had already proven my worth to myself, and that's the only validation that truly matters. In the end, the real reward wasn't the job at Brooks Tech or the award at the gala. The real victory came when I realized that my identity was mine to define, not my family, not society, just me. And that was the moment everything shifted. I stopped trying to make them proud, and instead, I started making myself proud. It's been a long road to get here,
but I know I've only just started. The journey of self-empowerment doesn't end with one success or one victory. It's an ongoing process, one that requires constantly challenging yourself and stepping into spaces you once thought were impossible. And that's exactly what I'm going to keep doing. But the truth is, we all have a story like this, whether it's family, friends, or society telling us we're not enough. We all face moments where we have to choose. Do we live for others, or do we live for ourselves? The hardest part is taking that first step away from the shadows of others' expectations and into your own light. So let me ask you, what's been holding you back from stepping into your own truth? If you've ever faced rejection, disappointment, or felt overlooked, I want to hear your story. Comment below and share what moment changed everything for you. What did you do to finally take control? And if you're still in that struggle, remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. Subscribe for more stories of triumph, growth, and the moments that define us. Because this journey isn't over yet, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.